There are 156,000 people on the island of Curaçao. That's fewer people than live in Cambridge, England. Fewer than Tallahassee, Florida. Fewer than 100 cities you've never thought twice about. Today, at the FIFA World Cup, they scored against Germany. This is how that happened. 60 kilometers off the coast of Venezuela, there is a small Dutch island in the southern Caribbean. It has one main city, one national stadium, and until 15 years ago, it didn't even have its own football team. For generations, the people of Curaçao had watched the World Cup the way billions of others do, as fans, cheering for Brazil, or Argentina, or the Netherlands. Never for themselves, because there was no themselves to cheer for. Curaçao was a Dutch colony for nearly 400 years. Since 1634, when the Dutch West India Company planted its flag on the island, Curaçao's destiny was tied to the Netherlands. Its best people went north. Its best footballers played for the Orange. When FIFA allowed the island to register its own team in 2011, after the dissolution of the Netherlands Antilles, Curaçao began something that seemed, at the time, almost impossible. They decided to go to the World Cup. The problem was simple and enormous. You cannot build a national football team from 156,000 people. Not really. Not one that can compete at the highest level. So Curaçao did something that had never quite been done this way before. They built a team from their diaspora. Over 100,000 Curaçaoans live in the Netherlands. Nearly 2/3 of the island's entire population, living in Rotterdam, Breda, Groningen, Nijmegen. Raised Dutch, trained Dutch, but carrying the island inside them. Under FIFA rules, a Dutch footballer with Curaçaoan heritage could choose to represent the island. All they needed was proof of connection. A parent born there, a grandparent, a bloodline running back to the Caribbean. In 2015, Patrick Kluivert took charge of the national team. One of the greatest Dutch strikers of his generation. A man who understood this story personally, because his own mother was born in Curaçao. He began calling players. Within months, Leandro Bacuna, then of Aston Villa, made his debut. His brother, Juninho, followed. Eloy Room, goalkeeper. One by one, players who had never played for their ancestral home began arriving at the small national stadium in Willemstad. Slowly, Curaçao began to win. In 2017, they won the Caribbean Cup, their first ever qualification for the CONCACAF Gold Cup. Small steps, but real ones. The island was starting to believe. In January 2024, a new coach arrived. Dick Advocaat, 78 years old, former manager of the Netherlands, South Korea, Belgium, Russia. A man who had seen everything football could offer. Why would a coach of his stature take a job with the smallest nation in CONCACAF? Advocaat never gave a complicated answer. He saw a team with European quality, Caribbean hunger, and a story nobody had written yet. He wanted to write it. What followed was 10 matches, unbeaten. Victories over Barbados, Aruba, St. Lucia, Haiti. 15 goals in the second round alone. Then the final group. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Bermuda. Only the group winner would go to the World Cup directly. Jamaica, led by former England manager Steve McLaren, had the same number of points as Curaçao going into the last match. The two teams would meet in Kingston. Winner takes all. Advocaat wasn't on the bench that night. He had returned to the Netherlands for a family emergency. For 90 minutes, his assistant Dean Garay held the line. Jamaica attacked. Jamaica pressed. Jamaica needed a goal. It never came. When the final whistle sounded in Kingston on November 18, 2025, Curaçao's players collapsed on the pitch. Some wept. Some stood completely still, as if afraid that moving might break the moment. On a small island, 60 kilometers off the coast of Venezuela, people streamed into the streets. In Rotterdam and Breda and Groningen, Curaçaoan families held each other in their living rooms. The smallest nation in the history of the FIFA World Cup had just qualified. Group E: Germany, Ecuador, Ivory Coast. When the draw was made, the football world looked at Curaçao's group and moved on quickly. There were bigger stories to follow. Germany, four-time world champions, ranked 10th in the world. Opening match in Houston. On June 14, 2026, Curaçao walked out onto a World Cup pitch for the first time in their history. The stadium held 60,000 people. The whole island of Curaçao, all 156,000 of them, could have fit inside it twice. Felix Nmecha scored for Germany in the 6th minute. Exactly what everyone expected. The familiar story of a small nation arriving at a big tournament and being reminded immediately of the distance between dreaming and competing. Then came the 21st minute. A switch of play. Curaçao breaking down Germany's right flank. A poor clearance. Livano Comenencia, 22 years old, recovered the ball on the edge of the box. He didn't hesitate. The shot was hard and true. Manuel Neuer, one of the greatest goalkeepers who has ever lived, had no answer for it. 1-1. Curaçao against Germany at the World Cup. The players converged on Comenencia in a wave. In Willemstad, people who had been awake since the early hours of the morning, watching on phones and laptops and televisions, heard something that had never been said before in their lifetimes. Curaçao have scored at the FIFA World Cup. Germany regrouped. Of course they did. They are Germany. The final score was 7-1. There was no miracle comeback. No fairy tale ending. Not today. But here is what remained when the final whistle sounded. Curaçao's name on a World Cup score sheet. Forever. No one can take that back. Not the 6 goals Germany scored after it. Not the group stage. Whatever happens next, the record books will show, for as long as football is played, that a 22-year-old from the island with 156,000 people beat Manuel Neuer at the World Cup. There is a question that runs through every underdog story in football. What does it mean to compete? Truly compete. When you know the result is almost certainly written before kickoff. For most nations, the World Cup is about winning. For Curaçao, at least for now, it is about something different. It is about a colonial island that spent 400 years sending its best people north, finally calling them home, and pointing them toward the biggest stage in the world. It is about a generation of young players in Rotterdam and Breda, who grew up Dutch, but felt something else when they heard the word Curaçao. Something that no passport fully captured. and chose, when given the choice, to represent it. It is about 156,000 people on a small island in the Caribbean who watch their country's name appear on a World Cup score sheet for the first time in history. Germany won 7-1. That is the number that will appear in the record books. But Curaçao also scored. And that number, that one, belongs to them. This is the soul of the game. If you want the stories behind the score lines, the nations, the people, the moments that football almost missed, subscribe to Souls of the Beautiful Game. The next story is already waiting.